Welcome to Monsters Multiclass, your Dungeons & Dragons fix. I'm Eliotti,
I'm Jared Bornagle.
And I'm Will Meldon.
and on this episode, we are doing our Monk Retrospective, where we take a look at monks through 5th edition from the beginning, what they set out to be, how well they accomplished that, the changes through each book, and what we'd like to see in the future. This is part of an ongoing series, playlist link at the top if you want to check out the other ones, though it's not necessary to understand this one. Let's dive into it.
Yeah, so the question that always comes up when we start with these classes, less so even the mechanics, just the basis, is what makes a monk? And looking at the player's handbook, what was kind of listed out here, the two words that wrap it up rather well: training and asceticism. Oh, if I can say that correctly, asceticism. There we go. Got it the second time. That idea of withholding in order to reach enlightenment, usually from a religious perspective. D&D doesn't lean extremely heavily on the religious aspect. I think it may have tried doing that early on in like the player's handbook. It certainly does not feel like a important aspect in newer classes in newer subclasses and such, but that might be getting ahead of things here. But the general idea is that this is your martial arts character, the one who's able to bounce around, climb walls, deliver 20 kicks in a second, and just overall look really cool doing it.
Yeah. Kung Fu. The
The
TV show Kung Fu. If you look up like the history of monks, they came out in the original D&D, like the very first edition, and it was clearly stated the creators of it were heavily inspired by the show Kung Fu and wanted to get a class to make themselves feel like a character from that. I don't know that show. I've never watched that show. I'm sorry if it's terrible or problematic. And we're like, this isn't like a pitch for it, but it is absolutely the base of the monk class. And I definitely think the monk is probably one of the strongest, if not the strongest, class identities in terms of baked in flavor. When you say like I'm a monk and you're talking in the context of like fantasy and you know there's going to be combat, everyone knows what you mean. You know what you mean. That's just the name of it defines the play style very strongly, and every single subclass nails it, and it's just a different variation of it. I don't like fighter could feel like really messy, and we talked about that a lot in our fighter retrospective. Ranger kind of felt like it didn't quite know where it was going, tried to change as it went. From the beginning to the present day, Monk has just been solid in that sense. It's makes it really disappointing. There's a lot of controversy around the mechanics of it and of how good of a class it actually is.
Yeah, and I think there's controversy in, I guess, a lot of aspects of the monk as well. I've heard a lot of negative things regarding the tokenism of Eastern mysticism. We are not equipped to handle that conversation well. And to shout out another YouTuber, Legal Kimchi, if you're interested in those conversations, go on over to him because that dude is smart. Really smart, and very great at talking about those things. We like talking about mechanics. So, in terms of mechanics, I mean, there's a lot of, I think, general complaints that you hear about the monk. It is one of those classes that's brought up in terms of the weaker of, or one of the weakest of the core 13 classes. Where that stems from, I think, is one of the more difficult conversations, though, because what they do and what they're supposed to do isn't the type of class that has like this very obvious return on investment. The Paladin, for example, one that I don't even know if we'll do one of these conversations about. We probably will, but like, it does exactly what it sets out to do. It says, I'm going to do a whole bunch of melee damage and it's going to be awesome. The monk's like, oh, I kind of have battlefield control and I've got the ability to run all over the battlefield and I can do some damage pretty well and get a lot of hits, but there's also this stunning strike so I can lock people down, and there's a lot to them in terms of what they're trying to accomplish. And I think that makes them a little difficult to play in some ways, and then also not giving that like immediate, as I said, return on investment where you're like, yes, I did the thing, and because of that my monk is good and is helpful in this combat. You gonna
I don't know how to
disagree? You
follow
go
that
for it.
up. No, I
Oh,
don't know.
okay.
I'm just absorbing what you said.
Okay.
None of that was correct.
Go for it then.
I'm done.
Oh, okay.
The monk is a silly class.
Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, one of the things like I kind of thought about was how the monk it's mathematically not very good. The math is there, you can't really refute it. And it's just kind of, I've always found it very silly to do the like weeaboo fighting magic kind of thing. And you're right, it has the strongest class identity, but like from a realistic perspective, you're not better off not having weapons and armor. And I think that's reflected well in the fact that you do less damage and get your ass kicked.
And I feel like where Ollie, go ahead, Ellie.
I say that's really adventure dependent. At our table, we don't deal with the issue much of like not having our equipment and still needing to adventure and fight and dungeon delve and whatever. I could see that being a common thing if certain tables are really strict about rest rules where you cannot sleep in armor. Being a monk is a big benefit. If it's more of like, let's say, like a heist style campaign and you're not always going to be able to walk in with your great sword and your longbow on your back, being a monk is a big benefit. So I think that one's really table dependent. Because sometimes just being the character by itself, if they are naked or if they have all the gear they want, are relatively just as good, can be a really big benefit.
Yeah, and one thing that's less table dependent and campaign, well, pretty campaign independent, is the fact that monks don't have to spend money on things. Spellcasters have spell components they need to buy that they usually burn up. Fighters and other martials. Yeah.
They do, yeah.
I mean, a lot. Seriously, look at our last campaign. The cleric was basically always broke because she was spending all of her money on res spells.
Yeah.
What was it? The Hero's Feast. That's the one. That's like a 2,000 gold spell that you have to spend and consume the money for. Monks don't have anything to spend money on, which means really that they're opened up to spend their money on other things like magic items if they want to. If that's the type of campaign, I guess, where you can buy magic items. I'll say most you have a couple opportunities to do so.
Mm-hmm.
They're also not burdened with things like concentration. No, but attunement is actually where I'm going with that, where they don't have to attune to an armor or anything like that. Like they have a lot of things that other classes will get around using magic items. They kind of just already have. Having their attacks be magical, for example, at 6th level means their monk weapon attacks, I believe is what it is, not just unarmed, means they don't ever really need a magic item in order to get around those resistances that come up.
It is just unarmed strikes, by the way.
Oh, it is? Okay.
Yeah,
but still, that's, you've got it. It's literally your
Right.
hands. You're never going to be without your magic item.
Right.
So I guess, maybe we're speaking too broadly and we should just get into some of the specific abilities and such. But, as I look at the core class, it isn't the best at anything, but I do feel like it does a great job of being good at a lot of things. Having this ridiculous movement speed is really, really helpful. Not having to wear armor is helpful and usually gives you a pretty good AC boost early on. I think later on it's hard to, get to 20 AC where the fighter just picks up plate and the shield and hey, they're there.
Right. But still, that's 1,500 gold for the plate, and then a shield takes up an arm.
Right, which has scenarios where you don't want that, like I don't know, great weapon master any two-handed weapon that you want to use.
Right.
So I know a lot of this I'm going to be defending the monk, because I just like monks. I've enjoyed playing them. I think every time they're at the table, they are interesting. They're doing a lot when they know how to play it. It's in the same way that, like, with a druid. When I first started playing 5th edition, I thought druids were weak or boring or whatever, because all that I really viewed them as was a character that summons and can go into wild shape. And even that, I was probably misguided on how good either of those things were. But it's a mechanically complex class, and I feel like the monk kind of falls under that as well, where you can tell me until you're blue in the face that the numbers work out so that they do less damage, and so they're just less good as a class. It's like, but in what world is that the only thing we're looking at? They have, again, this movement speed that is numerically better than any other class without having to invest in anything besides their own level ups.
Right.
They have an unarmed strike that's really, really good. That, you know,
Yeah, the
say
martial arts, they at the easiest get the most attacks, especially early on.
right.
Just kind of for free right away at first level of martial arts. They get up 2 attacks.
Right.
That's hard to get at first level.
And then, you know, stunning strike, while I find the feature to be not my favorite, I don't love stunning strike for a couple reasons that I'm sure we'll get into. It is without a doubt really, really good. Once you land a stunning strike, it kind of changes the combat, unless you're fighting a mob of creatures where just locking down one doesn't mean anything. It's the equivalent of a spell. Like, if a stunning strike was a spell, that's a spell that would be used all the time.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I believe it's called Hold Person, actually.
Yeah.
Well, which is kind of not a great spell.
Really?
Hold person?
What?
Yeah, that fails so much. And
That's
it's
just
only
you.
on humanoids. It's not.
Yes,
No,
it is
it's
only on humanoids. You're right. Stunning Strike is not only on humanoids, though.
right.
So if
And
it was,
it's
then that would
rare to
stink.
be for things to be immune to stunned.
Right.
It is not rare for things to be immune to paralyzed. And also with stunning strike, it's something you add on an attack that hits.
Yes.
I punched them in the face. I got my damage, and then I'm going to try and stun them. Hold person is an entire action. It's a spell slot. If it fails, you wasted your turn.
And if it succeeds, it's concentration. So there's
yeah. I wouldn't really call them comparable.
Fair enough. It's a better Hold Person. How about that?
That is an incredibly wrong thing to say. Like,
I
that is just.
I know.
Oh
I just
God.
wouldn't try and compare them. They're pretty different.
I would try to compare them. I would also add that Hold Monster exists for
A 5th level spell.
Yeah.
5th level spell that is absolutely nuclear. Stunned versus paralyzed is totally. If you time it correct, paralyzed is an encounter ender.
But how often does that happen? I know that's always the big thing. Like the hold person, hold monster is like one of those big spells where it's, in theory, it's amazing, and it never works out that way.
It's also burning a huge resource.
Yeah, and the entire turn, and like the initiative order needs to line up in that way, and you need to have other people there who could take advantage of it with big hits and could spend their smites or whatever, try and get crits. And they can even still miss. It's not a guaranteed hit if they're paralyzed. Like you roll with advantage and you can miss. That happens kind of a lot.
But then that's the auto crit if it does hit, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So I mean, yeah, it's higher risk, higher reward in that case. But again,
Right.
we are comparing a spell that you get at 9th level and takes up your entire action versus a thing that you can do at 5th level as a monk and do it potentially, if you're using the key points for it, you could try and attempt it 4 times in one turn. If you do, you know, your 2 attacks and then flurry of blows, which takes a key point, and then a key point for each stunning strike attempt. It would be burning all of your key points in one turn. But the fact is that if you fail, you can try again rather easily.
Yep.
And it only lasts for one turn, so that's different. I know, but regardless, it's good. Like it just, I will
Also,
you
your
play
DC is almost certainly going to be lower.
your DC? You said
Yes,
that's fair. It is.
than a
It's
full caster.
one of the hardest things about monks is that they are multi-attribute dependent, and with something like a paladin, it doesn't matter too much because their charisma, their spell save is just not that important. It doesn't come up that much. A monk, it can come up a whole bunch. So yeah, I get that. I mean, that's what makes the Way of the Four Elements so hard to accept.
Right.
There's a couple
Wondering
other reasons.
What'd you say? And like, yeah, that's correct. It's unacceptable.
Yeah.
But I guess before we dive into any sort of specific things, since we're still talking generally, I would just say monks I find them a blast to play, even if the damage isn't catching up or keeping up, because I feel like there's a ton you could do on your turn, even though you are just a martial character, in terms of just a bunch of different options and just a lot of tools in your tool belt beyond just I hit
Yeah,
over and over and over again.
and I think, looking at low levels only, fighters can very much feel pretty boring in that regard. If you're level 5, it's like, all right, I attack, and I attack again. And that's okay. I mean, there's nothing wrong with simplicity in a class. But it's
Right.
one of the reasons I do like the monks, as you said. It's just there's a lot you can do, there's a lot you can attempt, and there's often less limitations. Say that idea of, okay, a fighter says, I want to be over in that position because where I'm at right now is not good. A fighter's options are to disengage as an action or to accept the opportunity attacks and then probably take 2 turns to run over to wherever that spot is. Where a monk says, I want to be in that spot. Bonus action, disengage, 1 key point used. Sprint as far as they need to go. If they need to dash, they still have their action available. If they don't need to dash, maybe they can take some attacks while they go. Depending on their subclass, they can even just attack something and basically get disengaged for free. I think that's the drunken monk, drunken master. If they use flurry of blows, they can disengage for free entirely. Yeah, just little things like that where it just never feels like you're restricted in what you want to do beyond the resource management.
I don't know if I brought this up before, but there's an episode of Rocko's Modern Life.
Oh, this is
where
always a good start.
They go to a ski resort, and the ski resort's tagline is everything is $5. And they're like, $5 for everything at a ski resort. That's incredible. And they park, and it's $5 to park. And then they get to the ski lift. It is $5 to get to the ski lift. Everything costs $5. It's $5 to go back down. When Rocco goes to the Death Mountain, he's like, I don't want to go down this. Like, well, it's $5 to send you back down. And he's like, I don't have $5. So they push him down, and it's a great sequence. But the point was that, like, little by little, they took all of his
say
money.
it like Rocco, though.
I can't. I don't have
You
an
can't do the
Australian
voice?
accent. No.
Okay. Sorry, go
But
ahead.
that's what Monk is like. There's lots of fun to have, but every time you want to have fun, it's $5, and eventually you run out of money.
That is a really great point and a really great metaphor for it. I loved that. Because yeah, the key, which we haven't really talked about yet.
Mm-hmm.
Most things do cost key, and usually Monk's key feels very limited. It's always equal to whatever the monk level is. And at low levels, if it doesn't feel like you have a ton, you do get it back on short rests, but those could be kind of iffy sometimes, depending on what's going on in your venture and your party makeup.
Yeah, for that reason, I think key alone is why we need to have this conversation at all, because I do think that was a short-sighted design philosophy, and I get a strong feeling we will see a major change to the monk in further additions or reworks or whatever you want to call future editions of Dungeons and Dragons.
That I'm not so sure on, because again, if you go back and read the history of Monk, they're basically been the same from like the beginning to now, like stunning strike and quivering palm and the fast movement and the that wall running, unarmored strikes. Like I haven't played the previous editions, but just reading up on them, it sounds like that's been the monk from the beginning to now. They used to be considered a lot stronger, and they had like were really hard to get to because you had to like have high ability scores and like everything and stuff like that, and because of that, we were really overpowered. And so maybe this was an overcorrection to try and bring them in tune with everything else. Because fifth edition doesn't have that design philosophy where you have some classes that are just stronger than others, and hey, deal with it. So maybe that's what happened here. But I could definitely see tweaks coming. I'd be really surprised if there was huge changes to the monk because it's been such a staple and so consistent from start to finish. Not that it's just finished, but you know what I mean. Start to present.
Right. But I guess more, I think that key, we will see a pretty big change around, and it will not look like it does now. Say the one key point per level has this really weird feeling to it, where you mentioned at early levels, you feel extremely limited because you want to do your flurry of blows. That's your thing. You're a monk. Let me flurry of blows. And you only get to do it 3 times, 4 times. And let's hope you don't ever want to disengage or dash as a bonus action.
Or one of your subclass abilities that use it well.
Right. So that definitely feels odd. I will say, I think that's an early level problem and feels a lot less awful once you get past the first 5 or so levels. Once you start having up to 7, 8, 9 key points per short rest, then it becomes a conversation of, does your game give short rests? If they do, great. But that's more of just an issue with 5th edition, where a lot of early things were based around short rests, and now we're seeing a big pullback from short rests because it's just, they're not happening in the way that I think Wizards of the Coast expected them to. So that's why we're seeing things like the proficiency bonus abilities per long rest instead of your ability score modifier per short rests. Like that's been a big
baseless
change.
Speculation time.
Okay.
D&D 5.5 is removing short rests.
You heard it here first. It might be true. I mean, I wouldn't be terribly surprised. There's not many things that bring up short rests.
I wouldn't go that far.
In newer, sorry.
Yes,
let me rephrase that.
Sorry.
In newer designed, newer releases, they have pulled away from short rest as often.
You know, I'm going to go ahead and stake my internet cloud on that. They're removing short rests in 5.5.
So much internet clout too.
Yeah. All about the stake.
I think what I wanted to check was the warlocks that they recently added in Tasha's. I know this is like probably not the place for this right now, but I believe all of those abilities they added were long rest, except for a couple of things that were like, when you take a short rest, you can get some stuff back. But most of the things are long rest abilities. So if even the warlock is getting mostly long rest abilities, I think there's some merit to that. And we'll have to see where that takes the monk, because it would definitely change things.
And then one more kind of general thing I want to bring up, going back on role playing of it. So the monk, the idea is very much like you're from a monastery and you've trained there, and like you're perfecting your body, and this kind of mysticism to it. At one point, monks were even called mystics instead of monks. And I think that. Second edition, or Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, one of the early ones. But it's so easy to divorce them from that. It doesn't actually feel important to the class at its core and like the identity of the class, even though we were just talking about it and I brought it up about how there's such a strong class identity. The monastery part of it doesn't actually feel like that, even though it's very clearly baked into the flavor of it. We have had so many monks at our tables over the years of 5th edition. I don't know of one that played up that aspect of it.
0. Literally 0.
Yeah.
I would say that, I mean, obviously I would say this. I know in our home games, I've almost entirely divorced the concept of monasteries and monks and said these are just people trained in a specific way and hold these certain values of self-improvement and constant self-improvement. And that's more the focus. So, hey, here's
Right.
secret society over here. They make these types of monks. Here's this organization over here. They make monks. I don't think the religious aspect plays well with them. And I'm not entirely sure if that's just because of our table, but I will say that most monks I've seen in, talk to with other people about how they've played their monks, it rarely comes up that they are a monk of X church. Unlike a paladin, where I do feel like there's some debate as to how ingrained that is.
I think they're the only class that has this almost organizational structure
Mm-hmm.
to it. Like you need to belong to club whatever. Whereas
Maybe
like
bards?
not really. You can just say like, "Oh
College,
no,
yeah.
I didn't." I mean, they're
I didn't go
called
to college.
colleges, but you didn't need to go to college.
You're right. No, monks, they do have an organization, in the same way that, looking at different martial arts styles, they have like a beyond the um beyond the martial aspect, there is a way of life generally associated with that martial art. So I think that's where that organizational aspect feels to take, like it takes root, more so than the religious aspect.
Right, but more often than not, I still just see it as they're almost played as fighters. Not in play style, but in terms of like it's just a blank slate, and then they're a martial character, and this is they're the fast, unarmored martial character, where the fighters are the slower armored martial characters. But like it's kind of a blank slate and can be what they want, and that's what I keep seeing. Where the monk is like they have nothing to do with monasteries or
Hmm.
anything like that. It's just they just learned it where they learned it. Same as
Yeah,
a fighter.
and I don't know if there's a way to get around that beyond changing the name of the class to like martial expert. I don't know.
Pugilist.
Pugilist, yes, that's, and there is other, I think that's actually a popular class itself. Homebrew class is a pugilist. I don't think I've ever actually read it before, but
I don't know.
that seems like a direction that maybe they could go if they were so inclined to fully separate it from that monastery aspect.
Right.
Which
The problem, of course, being subclasses that don't make any sense with that idea.
Right. Yeah, I meant more again,
Yeah.
like future stuff. We'll see how much is actually backwards compatible. It's not like Wizards of the Coast has ever just gone and made books obsolete.
It's another way to handle it, and again we really haven't seen what's current subclasses. And what's interesting, I feel like we're having like the entirety of the discussion right up front here in the player handbook section, because
Yeah.
it just hasn't changed that much from release to release. So we won't go through in more detail, but spoilers there. But
Spoilers, we'll go in more detail.
well, spoilers that it doesn't change much, and not much is going to come out of each release.
Okay.
Yeah. I think if they want to see, and I don't know if they have Wizards because they have any reason to want to see it, but if they want that kind of monastery sort of religious flavor baked in, they need to rope more divine things into the subclasses and into the monk, because they really don't have anything. Like clerics, in a sense, you could play a cleric as in I'm just a wizard who studied this type of magic, and this is how my powers manifest. Like you could do that with most things, but you don't see it. Clerics are usually clerics. They
Right.
usually pick a god, and people are happy to do that and play it up. The monk doesn't have anything. It's all martial stuff. Sometimes some like shadowy magic things, and that's about it. So they need clerics spells type things. They need divine feeling things like clerics get, like how druids get nature spells, and maybe not spells being
Abilities is enough.
yeah, spells may not be the option, but yeah, abilities. And that's why, again, like in the first edition version, it was a subclass of cleric, like a prestige
Right.
class. You had to be a cleric first, and then I think a fighter, and then I don't remember the specifics, but you had to be a cleric first. And I have a feeling that had that much stronger identity to the monasteries and that aspect of being a monk.
Yeah,
And it's just kind of gone away.
I see it going the other direction. I really do. I don't think they're ever going to try and go back and make it more religious based, because the the aspects that are highlighted by the mechanics are the self-improvement stuff. The idea of inner, I don't want to say inner peace. That's too, I don't know, on the nose for it, but just that idea of making yourself better. And I think that when you try to tie class mechanics, getting powers from a religious aspect, that takes away from that self-improvement idea that is already, that is what gives it the class identity. That's what makes a monk feel like a monk, is somebody who is dedicated and trained to themselves and to their ideals. And while those ideals can stem from a religious aspect, they are not necessary for the character. And I don't see them trying to make them feel necessary for the character. And personally, I don't want them to, because if you want to play the religious martial character, play a paladin.
Yeah. Or just play monk or a fighter and make them religious.
Right.
Like
that's
my next
fine.
character
Yes.
is a ranger, and I was going to make her a religious ranger. She doesn't have cleric abilities. Actually, she does because she has a feat with cleric spells. But see, there are a bunch of ways to go about it. Yeah, and I understand what you're saying. It doesn't need to be baked into the class.
Yes. Yeah, and I think it would detract from the class more than add to it.
Yeah, totally. Okay, so we talked a lot on the general monk. It's kind of like at its core what a monk is. I think it's time to dive into kind of like what the books did and some like the initial subclasses and what they were trying to do with them.
Sure. Do we need to talk about like the base class at all?
I think we kind of cover that. Like they get faster speed, they get ki, they get stunning strike,
They get slow
the
fall.
martial arts. Yeah, I don't know if that sort of detail is necessary.
No.
The unarmored movements, don't need armor. Their fists and knees and legs hit harder. Their attacks become magical. Yeah, a lot of
All
great
right.
stuff there.
Good.
Yep.
Let's get into the player's handbook then.
Yeah, so the player's handbook has 3 subclasses with it, and this is how the game launched with the monk with these 3 subclasses: Way of the Open Hands, Way of Shadow, and Way of the 4 Elements. Way of Open Hand is really kind of like the default monk. It just takes the idea of that, the base monk, and just adds to it. There's nothing too crazy or unique about it, but I do think it's a really solid one. Where when you do flurry blows, you can knock people down or knock them prone and things like that. This is also the way to get Quivering Palm, which is a really kind of famous quintessential monk ability, the one where you can hit them in a certain way where it causes these vibrations in the body, which you could use it to kill them at a later point in time. At 17th level, it probably never almost comes up in any game, but that's like a famous monk thing.
I believe it used to be part of the base class.
Yeah, I think so.
And I would probably argue that it should have been in 5th edition as well.
Yeah.
I think the base class was missing some stuff like that. Honestly, you could put the entire Way of the Open Hand into the monk base class, and I'd probably be a little bit happier
and then just
with
get
it.
rid of it. Yeah. Because it's not super flavorful. It's just you're better at martial arts.
No, I mean, even if we read the class description, monks of the Way of the Open Hand are the ultimate masters of martial arts combat, whether armed or unarmed. They learn techniques to push and trip their opponents, manipulate ki to heal damage to their bodies, and practice advanced meditation that can protect them from harm. That's just the monk.
Yeah.
Like, flat out, that is the monk. And
funny thing to note, they actually, quickened healing, which is an optional feature they added to the monk, kind of looks a lot like that healing ability from Open Hand. So I think we're right on our diagnosis of this. Yeah.
And it does seem we keep finding those in these retrospectives, like one subclass where it's like it's the monkiest monk, it's the fighteriest fighter. It just keeps happening. Yeah.
The rangeriest
ranger. The sorcerist sorcerer.
Yeah,
it's interesting.
It is interesting because I think this is the only time where we've seen the classiest class, the subclassiest whatever, where Tasha's then adds features to mimic that, to take from there and kind of say, yeah, that was the monkiest monk, and everybody probably should have had some of those features. Right. I almost do wish they went a bit further. It's just, this is not balanced, play tested. I'm just spitting into the wind here. But if it was, all monks get the ability to, when they use their flurry of blows on one of the attacks, they get this, must succeed on a dex saving throw or be knocked prone. That would have probably changed a lot in terms of how people viewed monks if that was added as an optional feature.
Right.
But again, don't like harp on that one specific idea. I
Right.
think them being able to knock a creature prone all the time with just flurry of blows, every single monk, probably a little bit strong and would actually invalidate the Way of the Open Hand class entirely. So,
Right. Next on his way is Shadow. This is the Shadow Monk.
the ninja.
The ninja base. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. I think this one's really cool as well. Flavorful, still fits the core class. Doesn't feel like it's ripping it away or anything like that. The Shadow Step ability, I think, is super cool. When you're in Dim Light or Darkness as a bonus action, you can teleport 60 feet to an unoccupied space that's also in Dim Light or Darkness. That's just cool as shit. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
who doesn't love that?
It's a little bit hard to run, and I think we ran into a lot of issues with it when we had someone playing one at our table of what constitutes as dim light. And I also think the DM at the time was kind of a stickler about it a lot of times, where it'd be like, oh no, you're in an open field now. It's like, well, okay, are there trees around? Yeah, well, there's a shadow there, but that shadow doesn't count. It's like, well, okay, then like, I get that it's not dim light, but when does my character get to use their abilities? And would it really be broken if I could go from that tree to that tree? I could probably just run there anyways, like little stuff like that. But anytime you are in darkness, which happens quite a bit when you're adventuring in dungeons, you got some great movement speeds.
Right. You also get some spell casting by spending 2 key points: Darkness, Dark Vision, Pacify, Tracer, Silence.
Yeah, and that we'll probably talk about a little bit more with Way of the Four Elements, which comes up next. But you rarely hear people complain about the cost of these things, and that says a lot. Darkness for 2 key points seems generally accepted that it's fitting for its cost.
Right.
Same for all of these, and they are 2nd level spells. Yeah, so we almost get this currency of what is key worth? Probably about 1 spell level slot.
Right. Yeah, like Pacify to Trace for 2 key points is awesome. When you need that spell, it's amazing to have.
Yeah.
That has saved our butts so many times.
So many times.
And now here's a character who, in a sense, always has to kind of prepare, just needs 2 key points.
Yeah, so always happy with the Way of the Shadow. I haven't seen it too much at our tables. I think we had one person play one ever.
It's been a while.
So I've always wanted other people to play it and to play it myself, but that's who gets that opportunity.
Actually, let me just say it kind of sucks because you get a
Classic.
bunch of really cool stuff, but it just doesn't come up. The Shadow Step's cool, but you already have maneuverability out the wazoo and it's hard to run at a table. You're not like good at punching things when it's dark, and that doesn't come out until 17th level or whatever. There's just not a lot of combat stuff baked in there. And I think that's one of the
fair.
problems.
No, I think that's perfectly fair.
You know what it's benefited by is the idea that we take what was in the open hand and put that in the base class. I think that bothered me less.
Fair. I think if we were to talk about what I would like to see from this, I think, looking it over, there are a lot of out of combat abilities besides darkness, but you can't even see through the darkness.
Yeah, the combo that's really fun, there's nothing in here to get that.
Yeah.
Blind
so that's a bummer.
Actually be a great addition. And it makes sense as a monk that you really sense these things.
Yeah, I think something else I'd like to see is the ability to hide as a bonus action, as part of your like Step of the Wind stuff. Or just give it to them for free. You can just hide as a bonus. I know that's the rogue thing, but don't make me take 2 levels of rogue just to be a good monk. So, yeah, while it's cool, it's flavorful, I will agree that this really benefits mainly from the base class and has some lighter stuff for out of combat. The Shadow Step can have its uses, but it is a bit situational until 11th level when they can use an entire action to become invisible. Which, I mean, okay, invisibility usually costs an action because you're casting a spell or something like that. But Furbolgs, I think, get it as a bonus action, don't they? That's a racial ability.
For 1 turn.
Yeah, which is basically what this is.
Yeah.
It says until you make an attack, cast a spell, or are in an area of bright light. So that is a difficult rider as well.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I take it back. This subclass sucks. It's really cool, but it's missing some combat stuff. But you know what we can all agree on? Way of the Four Elements is the coolest sounding monk class ever. If you're not sure why we're chuckling right now, then you've probably never had a Way of the Four Elements at your table, or I don't know, you've never read a discussion about it online. Way of the Four Elements is the monk class, again, player's handbook here, where you're supposed to be tied into water, air, earth, fire, and it's kind of like the spellcaster monk subclass, but it really isn't good at all, because you get very few spell options, and every spell option you get costs too much. So this idea of once you're out of key points, you can't do your cool thing anymore is made very, very loud by the Way of the Four Elements. The options you get to choose from are usually pretty okay. I mean, they're not particularly bad, except for except for stuff like getting stone skin at 17th level. That's really bad, in my opinion. But you get the option to avoid those things.
5 key points to cast Stone Skin on yourself. Like,
Yeah.
what the hell is that?
I don't know. I mean, that's a spell that I don't even think is really worthwhile most of the time. And you know what? With the recent change, it's even less good, Stone Skin, because now creatures are doing force damage. They're getting around your resistance to, it's still non-magical bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing. So
Right.
I don't know. I throw up my hands at Stone Skin. It's not good. But that's not alone what makes Way of the Four Elements bad. It's actually, to me, the fact that you get very few of these disciplines, which is the whole benefit of the class, is that instead of getting really class abilities, you get like a cantrip or two for free, but otherwise you have to use one of your level ups to get these elemental disciplines that will then cost you key points and cost too much to use. So it'd be like if every time we looked at the Way of the Shadow, they were like, oh, you get Shadow Step, but it costs 2 key points. And oh, you get Cloak of Shadows, but it costs 3 key points. And Opportunist, we'll make that one cost 5 key points. Because screw you.
Yeah, so with Way of the Four Elements, you have a mismatch between the cost and then the spell you get to cast from that cost. You have a really limited pick in terms of like the elemental disciplines, which your level ups get new elemental disciplines. And then most of these require a save. Very few, if any, actually looking through them. I don't think there's a single actual attack. Like you could do Burning Hands, Cone of Cold, Hold Person, Stone Skin, Thunderwave, Fireball, Shatter. Yeah, these are all saves.
I think Fangs of the Fire Snake is one that it's that you can spend a key point, cause Tendrils of Flames to increase your distance by 10 feet, and it does fire damage instead of bludgeoning damage. And if you spend more key, it does an extra 1d10 fire damage.
Right. So your spell save DC is going to be low. It's on Wisdom. It doesn't get to be Dexterity.
Yeah, and we've seen in recent classes, like the Way of the Astral Self, that when saving throws are important to the class, they've made Wisdom able to replace your martial arts attacks as the proficiency. So I don't know if Way of the Four Elements would have been made better by doing that. It would have been made better, but it still wouldn't be great because of all the costs of key points. And something that really bothers me, if you wanted to play up a specific element, like I want to be the Earth Monk, you've got so few options. There's a couple of fire ones, sure, but like for Earth Monks, you have Shatter, with the Gong of the Summit at 6th level, and then the Eternal Mountain Defense at 17th level, and that's it. I think, you can make Wall of Stone also at 17th level.
Do
So
you
like,
remember when Water Whip was a bonus action and it was the only thing that salvaged this class?
yeah, and then they eroded it, didn't
No, like,
they?
oh, that was a typo. Sorry.
Yeah. They in that moment really drew a line because they could have said, "Oh, sorry, Way of the Four Elements was a typo. Let us redo that. Let's errata it. We're just gonna fix that class entirely." But instead, they were like, nope, it was just Water Whip. Water Whip was too strong." So that part really frustrates me, though. I mean, I feel like if you're going to make this the main thing, is that they have all these different elemental styles that they can choose from. Like, yes, okay, some people want to play it where they're picking from each thing, but even then, if you wanted to say I'm choosing from all four, I think in total you get how many? This is important. I should know this already. How many elemental disciplines do you get?
One additional at 6th, 11th, and 17th.
Thank you. 6th, 11th, and 17th. So you get 4 or 5 total. Why am I not finding this?
And one element.
You know the elemental attunement discipline and one other elemental discipline of your choice. So 2. And
Okay.
then, and you'll really only get one pick.
Yes.
One's
Yeah.
one's picked for you, and then you get to pick a second one. And then
And-
you get a third at 6th, a fourth at 11th, and a fifth at 17th.
Right. So you get 4 that you get to choose in total. So if you're going for like, I've got all 4 elements under my control, it's like, well, not until 17th level, actually.
Right.
We talked about this before. There are things that you need to put limits on. Warlock invocations. And there are things that nobody's getting hurt if you just pop the limits off. And this is a
Yeah.
great example.
100%. Give the monk literally all of these, the Way of the Four Elements, and let the key points be the limiting factor. And that's still not where I would land with this design decision, but just one of those, like, there's so many disconnects, and how was that another one?
Right. And another crappy thing about this is all of these spells that you get are at their base level. There is an upcasting option, but it costs you more key points. So it's like these things are already costing you too much key points. If you want to upcast them to keep them relevant as you level up, cost you even more key points. So the benefit you get of leveling up and getting more key points is negated by the fact that you kind of need to upcast these to keep them relevant. And so it's not like you're now doing them more.
Yeah. I've never played it this way, but I am curious to see just 2 changes to be made. One, reduce the key point cost of everything by 1 to bring it more in line with the Way of the Shadow, where it costs a key point per spell level, and then give them the option to just have all of these all the time, and they can just choose from them. They've got a lot more prepared. That's probably a lot. It might be a little too strong, but like, will it?
Don't know.
The world may never know. There is a popular homebrew rework of this subclass that I have used for NPCs. We've not used it for the table yet. For an NPC perspective, it's pretty good and adds a lot of these different abilities. And I think you get to choose like 2 at every point instead of just 1. So you get 3 at 3rd level and then 5 total at 6th level, 7, and then 9. So that's much more palatable.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's it. This one, not good.
All right, so that is the player handbook Monk, how D&D launched with the Monk. And as we said, it does definitely have a strong class identity. 2 of the subclasses are pretty decent, 1 kind of crappy. Let's see how it changes. The next book that had anything with Monk in it is Sword Coast Adventure Guide. There was 2 new... What?
That's my... Oh, I forgot.
Oh, good preparation, Jerry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, 2 new monastic orders in this: Way of Long Death and Way of the Sun Soul.
Oh yeah, that's why I forgot them.
Yep. Way of Long Death's okay. Way of Long Death, it's the Death Monk. It's the death version of this class. It seems like every class needs a death version of it. Wizards of the Coast seems to love that. And this is the monks, where they straddle the line of life and death and facilitates who crosses and who doesn't. It's everything's every class has one of those. um, it's edgy. It's okay. Like I don't know. It doesn't excite me. Nothing in the Sword Coast Adventure Guide really excites me. I don't know if you
No.
guys have any strong opinions. Like it stays true to what a monk is.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
think this one is okay. I mean, just looking at Touch of Death, it's a way to gain temp HP every time you reduce a creature to 0 HP. I don't think that really is enough to make a third level ability.
the
Uh,
only thing. Yeah, that's a
yeah,
little weak. Actually, you're right.
that's not super exciting. It doesn't really change up your play style in any way. And my big thing is always that your third level ability should be play style defining. You should feel like from the very first level up, you go, this is how my character is going to be played. And then it should add on to that with every subsequent subclass ability. This changes nothing. This changes absolutely nothing about how you interact. You're just attacking things at close range. You were already doing that. You were a monk. Now you just
Right.
get some temp HP for it.
If you happen to be the one to reduce them to 0.
Yeah.
Hilariously enough, the Fiend Warlock gets this at level 1.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I still think it's a little weak for that too. But-
It's pretty whatever, and
Yeah.
I don't know.
Then, going further, Hour of Reaping, it's an action to try and make some
Frightened.
creatures frightened. That's okay. I don't think frightened is that great, though.
It also sucks because it doesn't let you do monk stuff. When you do monk stuff, you can then do more monk stuff. Whereas
Yeah, that's actually interesting. Even with the
you lose
changes.
your bonus action.
Yeah, even with the change to Tasha's that recently came out, it said there's an optional class feature that I guess we're kind of jumping ahead here, but hard not to look back on them with new stuff.
Right.
The optional feature states that if on your action you spend a key point, you can then make a bonus action unarmed strike regardless. Since this doesn't take a key point, which is generally good, that means you can't use your bonus action to attack even with that optional feature. So, And then an 11th level ability that's just if you go down to 0 HP, you can have 1 HP instead. That one actually, it's pretty good in terms of, when there's no limit on it, there's no action required. It's just if you have key points left, you're going to stay up. I'm fine with that. It just still isn't changing how you play at all.
Yeah, it's kind of all like that. Yeah, and even as capped on 17th level, the Touch of Long Death, it's a whole action. You spend 1 to 10 key points, touch a creature, make them make a con saving throw, and then take 2d10 necrotic damage per key point on a fail. I don't know. I kind of take back my lukewarm response. I just don't like it.
Touch of the Long
it's
Death
okay, but
would be more interesting if it was a monk necrotic smite instead. When you hit,
Yeah.
you can expend key points to deal an additional 2d10 necrotic damage per
that
key
would be
point
cool.
spent.
Yeah, and come online earlier. That could be a 3rd level ability.
Oh my gosh. Yes, that could be a 3rd
And
level
then
ability.
that's very. It doesn't quite tie into then like the way of the Long Death about the obsessed with the meaning of the mechanics of dying. Because you're just killing things faster, but
You know what does actually do a pretty good job of that, though? The Way of Mercy subclass.
yes, it does. That I was gonna say that. I'd say it kind of feels like the Way of Mercy was sort of a rewrite of this, which came out in Tasha's, which we'll get to in a little bit, and we have a whole episode on it. Links at the top.
Links. But Sun Soul.
So yeah,
Sun Soul's next, and that is a monk that's learned to channel their own life energy into searing bolts of light.
Your Dragon Ball Z character.
Yeah.
From Street Fighter, the Hadouken guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You are Bulbasaur.
Ooh.
Bulbasaur. Okay.
And there's not even a lot of tie into the sun aspects, at least not in the flavor, not as much as I'd have probably liked. I think the flavor is expanded on a bit once we get into, this was reprinted in Tasha's, I believe. No, was it Xanathar's? Xanathar's, it was reprinted.
Oh, yeah.
And it adds a little bit more, but in general, Nah, there's not a lot. There's not a lot of flavor at all. You touch the light inside of all living creatures. Lend me your energy so I can drop my spirit bomb. And it's just
Yeah.
Goku. But its whole thing is that it has this is playstyle defining, at least at the start
Mhm.
here, just not strong enough. It has its radiant sunburnt, radiant sun bolt, that when they take the attack option, they can make a ranged spell attack they're considered proficient in. They add their dex modifier to attack rolls and damage rolls, and it does their monk damage die as a ranged attack instead of as a close range attack.
So it gives monks a ranged option, which
Yeah.
is neat. I like that idea.
Yeah, it falls apart when usually the monks are expecting to use their bonus action to take a third attack, to make another unarmed strike. This only lets you do that if you spend a key point to basically do your Sunbolt flurry of blows. So once again, we have this cool ability that's not seen to fruition because you're spending key points to have to use it.
Is that how that works?
When you take the attack action on your turn and use the special attack as part of it, you can spend one key point to make the special attack twice as a bonus action. The
Right.
only
So
other
that's-
time, go ahead.
Yeah,
I'll let you
that's
get
if
there.
you want to do the ranged. Again, if you want to do another radiant sunball, you could spend a key point and do two more. It's basically flurry of blows
Correct.
at range. I think you could take this and then still get your bonus action unarmed attack.
Correct, but that bonus action unarmed attack cannot be a sunbolt.
Oh, right. So you still get your attack. I guess it's
It
just
puts
not
you in
at
a weird
range.
place though, because you're either
Yeah.
at disadvantage with your sunbolts or doing some, yeah, that's basically it.
Yes,
Right. Or you do it and then you run up, and the next turn you're kind of not in a great place unless you manage to kill the thing.
right. Or you're sacrificing your bonus action attack, which means you're not doing your monk stuff.
Right.
Not to say you can't have other things you can, dodge as a bonus action if you want to, be harder to hit. I mean, there are options. It just feels like this wouldn't have ruined anything if your unarmed strike could have just be one of these sunbolts.
Right.
Because then you really do just get your ranged attacks. At 6th level, you basically get Burning Hands. The cost is more in line with Way of the Shadow. So,
Well, it's the same key point cost as Way of the Four Elements too, but this one, Way of the Four Elements, it's your action. As your action, you could cast Burning Hands. This one is immediately after you take the attack action, you can spend 2 key points to then cast Burning Hands as a bonus action. It's a million times better.
yeah.
It's still a little bit of a high key point cost, but at least it's not your entire action. So I'm okay with it. And then you could upcast it by spending more key points, which is, we already talked about being a little iffy, but
Yep, fine with that. Then
Yeah.
11th level, they get a really, really pared back fireball. It 20-foot radius sphere. They have to make a con saving throw, which I don't love that it targets Constitution, but I feel like between Constitution and Dexterity, I don't know which one is better to target.
right.
So, Will, do you have? I feel like that's something you would know.
Well, yeah, monsters usually have higher con, but the idea is just it's radiant, like you're
Right.
withstanding versus dodging.
Right. So,
Yeah.
either way, that one's fine. Say it does some pretty all right damage. It does take an entire action, and this did get an increase if you spend key points. Sorry, this got a small buff with that optional feature that we talked about a little bit ago, because if you spend key points to upcast it, to increase the damage on it, then you can use your bonus action to make an additional attack. If you just use your action for this, which really isn't worth it most of the time, because it's, unless you've got a lot of enemies grouped up, it's only 2d6 radiant damage. It's best to upcast it.
Right. It's 17th ability. It's cool. Sun Shield. Basically, it's an always on thing. And if something hits you with a melee attack, you do radiant damage back to them. 5 plus your wisdom modifier. I like
Yep.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah, so
definitely
overall,
agree.
I don't hate Sunsoul. I know the Radiant Sunbolt has some issues, but you could also look at it as just more versatility. You're a monk who has range options when you need it, but you could also you're still just as good in melee. Then you get the additional things of the Burning Hands, a kind of light fireball, and the Sun Shield at high levels if you get there. And again, it doesn't deviate from the core of what a monk is. It still doesn't feel like it's trying to change it up or anything. It's just another aspect of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think really my only issue is just that unable to use your bonus action for Radiant Sunbolt without making it your flurry of blows.
Right.
Or spending a key point. But otherwise, I agree. I think it's pretty solid. I think that it can play well up through high levels. There probably is some argument that 10 damage, which is most likely what you'd be dealing back with the Sun Shield, and only being for melee attacks, is like okay. I'm gonna
I mean,
just
it's always on.
yeah.
It's that's just your character now.
I almost want to see more because it's a 17th level ability. Some way to blind a creature when they hit you, and maybe if you attempt to do that and succeed, it ends the Sun Shield, and you have to spend a bonus action to bring it back.
Right.
Something like that could be cool. I don't know, but overall, it's fine.
Yep. So
Wait a
yeah,
second.
overall,
I have to derail because that's
Okay.
what I do. One of the things I've always thought would be interesting is if the monk did not have a limit or had a different limit on reactions. Like they could
Yes.
make more reactions. Let's say proficiency bonus. And then that kind of, so the question is, how much does that come up? Not really a lot. Here's an example where it could come up all the time. It's like a bunch of stuff just dogpiling you is now going to get slammed by your radiant damage because it uses your action. And you can only do that once. I have no idea. I think it's an interesting concept.
It is an interesting concept, and actually, I believe the Way of the Cobalt Soul, which is Matt Mercer's
I was going to
homebrewed
say there's a
one,
homebrew that has that.
it's if you've already taken your reaction, you may spend 1 key point to take an additional reaction. You can only use 1 reaction per triggering effect.
How did Matt Mercer steal the idea I just came up with?
I also missed that Sun Shield takes your reaction to do the damage. That sucks.
Yeah, so it's once per turn, really. And you can't do all of your other cool monk stuff.
Yeah, all right. That kind of sucks.
I do think that when I read that's the Mind of Mercury ability in Way of Cobalt Soul, I read that and I was like, that should have been a base monk feature, without a doubt. Spend a key point to take an additional reaction. It just makes sense.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. So Sword Coast Adventure Guide overall, nothing groundbreaking. They were clearly not trying to change or fix anything. It's just like, here's a couple different variations of the monk. Where with some other classes we've seen, as the new subclasses come out, they're using these new releases to try and make adjustments and corrections to the base class, especially with Ranger. We saw that a lot. Sword Coast Adventure, no, I don't think it does anything, and I don't think we're going to see it with future ones either, but we will keep going through. All right, the next release then is Xanathar's Guide to Everything, which reprinted the Sun Soul, as we talked about, and then added 2 new subclasses, the Drunken Master and the Kensai. Drunken Master is... I know there's like movies and stuff I've seen this style in, but...
It
I
is
can't
a
like
style,
pinpoint it.
I believe.
Yeah. Basically, so the flavor text is: the way of the drunken master teaches its students to move with the jerky, unpredictable movements of a drunkard. I think this one's a lot of fun. I think it has some really solid abilities and really just does enhance the monk well, again, not really changing the monk at its core in any way, shape, or form.
I think it's actually like a way that I wish more of these monk classes tried to go for. There are endless martial art styles out there, and each of them could probably make their own monk class. You just take what their usual goal is and turn it into more fantasy abilities, and I feel like that's endless inspiration. We talked recently about how fighters it almost feels like Wizards of the Coast ran out of ideas in terms of new fighter subclasses that aren't magic based. And to me, it's like monks shouldn't have that problem. There's so many options, and Drunken Master is a great example of that, where they took a real life martial arts style and turned it into a subclass rather well.
Right. And this one can do things like if they use Flurry of Blows, they can disengage. So kind of as they're like hitting everything around them, kind of back out of combat. Tipsy Sway later on, where they can like redirect attacks. Drunkard's Luck, where if you have disadvantage, to spend 2 key points to cancel the disadvantage. And Intoxicated Frenzy, where you can just hit a whole bunch of stuff around you as long as it's different things.
Yeah.
Which is unfortunate because that's my favorite, probably my favorite thing of any subclass the monk did, and it's at 17th level.
Right.
It's a little high
late.
up there.
Yeah.
And
it's really
like,
cool though.
It's really cool, but it's also like, it's not that strong. Like it's strong, but it's not that strong.
But it's so cool.
No. Yeah.
It's something that I think you probably could have added. You, Ellie and Will, you both could have added this. I think it probably could have come online earlier and been less numbers. Right now, or at 17th level, it's up to 3 additional attacks as long as they're different targets. At 11th level, it could have been 2 additional attacks. At 5th, it could have been 1 additional attack. Or I guess at 6th.
Wrong. It should have been proficiency bonus.
That would get out of hand.
Yep.
Yes.
Well, not really, because you're also then limited by the practical size of the battlefield.
And how many
when you
enemies
use Flurry
you can reach.
Blows, you can make exactly. You can make up to 3 additional attacks with it, provided that each Flurry Blows attack targets a different creature.
So, but here's the cool part: is like you're at 17th level, so your speed is what? It's 55, and then when you use Flurry of Blows in this class, you get an additional 10 feet. You're just all over the place. Every single person's getting punched.
Right.
Do y'all remember when I played this? Is a 17th level one? It was so fun. I loved it. It just got silly though, and that's almost the one negative I have to it. Is it was a combat stopper, like not in terms of it was so strong it stopped combat. I mean, it was 5 minutes of rolling dice.
Yeah, that was the biggest issue. Because
I was playing a barbarian too, so I was like, and I'm attacking recklessly, so it was all advantage attacks. So it was 2d20 rolls for each, and then we had to determine which ones hit, and if they hit, had to roll damage, and that's obviously its own, at that point, is a d8 plus.
And then if you want to, you could do things like
stunning strike
off of each one of those attacks.
Yes. So I absolutely loved it, but it is just it's not a very fun ability for everybody else at the table for longer than a one shot.
I enjoyed watching it.
Okay, well, maybe we're a different breed. I get the feeling that there'd be some times where people are like, all right, can this hurry on? Is this up to 3 additional attacks? So yeah, it's 5. So you get 7 attacks then on your turn.
Yep.
Which
is like what the monk should be doing.
I know, it's so
and they're not that good. It's like a D10.
It was literally just little whaps. They were nothing that impressive. If I wanted to, I could burn all of my key points in a turn and try and stunning strike everything. In which case, it's super cool, but still not that strong. Because things are going to pass, and you can't continue making attacks against them. So unless you have other party members who can capitalize on it, it's not going to do that much.
Right.
But you should. Like if I whipped around the battlefield and I stunned 7 creatures in one turn and it's like, oh, I'm out of movement speed, I would look to the wizard and I would say, you fireball me right now. Right now. Don't you dare hold off on that. I have evasion anyways. I've got at that point, plus 11 to my dexterity saving throws. I'm going to succeed. You fireball me right the fuck now.
Right. All right. And the next is Wave Kenzai. This is the weapon-based one where they train relentlessly to the weapons to the point where their weapons become an extension of their body. Their main thing is they could create additional monk weapons. So a lot of the monk stuff, almost all of it, like the martial arts and flurry of blows and getting a bonus unarmed strike, all require using a monk weapon or an unarmed strike, which are limited. This one is you could pick almost anything.
It's
Each of
the
these weapons can be any simpler martial weapon that lacks heavy and special. And you could also pick the longbow, which is cool. I love to see that because I mean that's like just a kind of very classic kind of historical thing used, and it's another way to give monks a ranged option that isn't the sun soul that we just talked about. And then they
yeah.
just get better ways to use it, like agile parry or Kenzai shots, where they like add +2 bonus to the AC if they have their Kenzai weapon in their hand, and hit stronger with their longbow.
Yeah, I really liked Agile Parry. So that's if you make an unarmed strike as part of your attack action on your turn and you're holding a Kensai weapon, you can use it to defend yourself, get a +2 bonus to your AC until the start of your next turn while it's in your hand and you're not incapacitated. I like it because it does play into that idea of choice with the monk, where a lot of times their focus is not in how to do the most damage, it's how to mitigate damage, how to avoid getting hit, and this just adds on to that. You know, you're not going to do as much damage because you're making an unarmed strike as part of the attack action. Until later levels, when your monk damage die catches up, that is going to be it's going to be less damage, like 1 damage on average, but getting a +2 bonus to your AC is pretty huge.
Pretty big. Yeah. Yeah, later on, like their Kenzai weapons become magical, which is really great and just kind of necessary to keep that in line with the base monk.
Right.
They and they could spend key for their Kenzai weapons attacks to do more, sharpen the blade, to spend key to do a bonus to their attack and damage rolls with your Kenzai weapons for a minute, things like that. So it's just kind of better use of the weapons. So its focuses less on the unarmed and more on the weapons, and it gives them greater options of which to use, which I think is a cool versatility.
Yeah, I was never a huge fan of the capstone. So at 17th level, you can basically give yourself advantage on a attack roll that you miss, and you can only do that once per turn. It
Yeah, but there's no limit. So if you miss one attack roll using a monk weapon, which Kenzai weapons are monk weapons, you
Yes,
can re-roll it. Like,
right.
I don't know, that's kind of cool. It's free. That's what I like about it. There's no limit. It's just a free thing. It's like, oh crap, I missed. Let me re-roll.
Yeah, yeah. I guess that's definitely one that when you need it, you're very happy you have it.
Yep.
I think that one of the big tragedies, and this is kind of universal in D&D nowadays, is that these weapon proficiencies are completely worthless. Like, if you're proficient in every single weapon of the game, long story short, it doesn't matter. You have
Yeah,
one. You use one weapon because it's just everything is damage. There's only a handful of weapons in this game that are unique in any way, and they
Mm-hmm.
suck, frankly.
yeah, and you do also have to choose the weapon. I think just when you level up. Yeah, so when you reach 6th, 11th, and 17th, you can choose another type of weapon, either melee or ranged. So,
And what are you going to choose? You're going to choose
yeah,
ninja sword and a longbow. End of
right.
story.
Right. So at second or third level, you get your 2 weapons. So yeah, I'm going to do, let's just say, a longsword. It doesn't matter. It's whatever melee weapon you want. And then a longbow, or again, whatever ranged weapon you want. And then at third level, or sorry, at 6th level, when you get your third weapon, what changed? You're like, oh, I got another one. Cool. I'm still using this exact same weapon. The only time where it would come up is if your DM also gives you a new weapon at that time. Like, oh, here's a magic item that I want you to use, but it's not one of the ones you're proficient in. Okay. Well, I guess I'll just take that. I guess I'm now proficient in hammers. And even more upsetting, that's a strong word, but something that is kind of a bummer. We talked about eliminating the need for subclasses, or for new updates, eliminating subclasses. Tasha's kind of wipes out this subclass, in my opinion, because you do get the dedicated weapon. So I think I'll read it. You train yourself to use a variety of weapons as monk weapons, not just simple melee weapons and short swords. So when you finish a short or long rest, so very easily, you touch one weapon, focus your key on it, and count it as a monk weapon. which then lets you. It basically has the same limitations. Only you can't do a longbow. That's, I think, the one big change.
Yeah, and you have to already be proficient in it. It doesn't grant proficiency.
That's true. This adds proficiency.
Right, and monk's base proficiency is simple weapons and short swords.
Yeah.
So
I guess you're
yeah.
right. Kensei it does it better.
Yeah, and then all those abilities of how to use their Kensei weapons are pretty cool. Well, since we already covered half of the optional rules, now is a good time as any to move on to Tasha's, because that is the next one.
It's true.
Yeah. And again, same list before, and I think we're going to keep saying it. Xanathars, the new monk subclasses, don't really shake anything up. Don't change like the power level of the monk in any way. It's more the same, just different ways to go about it.
But I do like all of them, so that's
Yeah.
cool. Like I felt like it was just solid additions across the board.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess what I found interesting is the other classes, as we go through each ones, we were able to pinpoint clear design philosophies that they were taking, and like how the subclasses changed and over time, and how that was reflected in the mechanics and what the Wizards of the Coast was clearly going for. I'm not getting anything like that with Monk,
Yeah.
which is interesting. I don't know why.
I think they just didn't have any revelations.
Yeah.
And I mean, because the only one that we see now is in Tasha's, is that like, oh, the monk needed a couple of boosts here and there. But if you ask any random person on the street what monks needed most, they probably say, what? I'm sorry, I don't understand what you're saying. But if you ask anybody in a D&D forum what they think a monk needed most, it's always the key. It always comes back to the key. There's too many things to spend your key on. It's the Rocco's modern life problem. And
it's going to be weird out of context if someone like skipped to this.
Well, go back to the timestamp that we won't put in.
Okay. I'm not doing that. Yeah, and then all of the optional class features in Tasha's, and we've definitely talked about it when we cover this. It's just different ways to spend key.
Yeah,
it just spends your key more. That was
more
really
or less
exciting.
I think the dedicated weapon does not, and I think dedicated weapon is really nice because it does give you that additional ways to, I don't know, just use darts or use other things that and get benefits out of them. Honestly, I feel like it helps mostly with adding a light ranged ability over just about anything else.
Right.
Otherwise, it's just giving you, like, I don't know, some flavor to your character. Fine.
Right.
But key fueled attack does take from the key cost on a lot of things, because it does say, if you spend 1 key point or more as part of your action on your turn, you can make 1 attack with an unarmed strike or monk weapon, that part's important, as a bonus action before the end of the turn. So
I do like that one. Yeah. It kind of softens the blow.
Especially with things like quickened healing, which is the 4th level one. As an action, you can spend 2 key points, roll a martial arts die, regain HP equal to number rolled plus your proficiency bonus. So if you take that as your action, you still get an attack that turn, and it doesn't feel totally wasted.
Right.
Focused aim, I don't think has been used yet at our table, so I don't have extremely strong opinions on it. It just seems like it feels like a key cost.
Yeah. Well, you could, if you miss an attack, 1 to 3 key points, and increase the attack roll by 2 for each of these key points.
Yeah.
So we talked about all these in a lot of detail in a previous episode. We'll put a link at the top.
Yeah. One of the things that's kind of been frustrating, though, is like and I'm so glad that Logan doesn't watch this show, because he'll never hear this.
He's currently playing a monk.
He's currently playing a monk in our campaign, one of our friends.
Yeah.
And he doesn't utilize every aspect of it. And he's going to be playing a monk in the next campaign as well. And I'm really hoping that having some time to play it, he starts to learn the ins and outs and whatnot, because I see some of this stuff just hasn't been used. And it's like, well, he's still getting his arms around the fact that as a bonus action, he can disengage. And like now we've got these optional features. And I think that what this really tells me is that the optional features aren't really intuitive for new players. It's giving you a lot more to do with a class that already can do a lot.
Right.
Which is great for people like us, because we love those options For new players, I might not even mention this stuff to them. Like, yeah, it's a power increase, but like you can play without it and you'll be fine.
So the two new subclasses in Tasha's are Way of Mercy and Way of Astral Self. We have covered these in detail in their own episodes, so links at the top for those. So we're not going to like go into the mechanics too much, just kind of in general what they are. And as we already mentioned, the Way of Mercy is kind of like a better Way of the Long Death. They kind of look like plague doctors in a way. They learn to manipulate the life force of others to bring aid to those in needs. They are wandering physicians to the poor and hurt. However, to those beyond their help, they bring a swift end as an act of mercy. It's kind of just like a less edgy way of saying they're the death monk, where they straddle the line of life and death type of deal.
Yeah, and I will say this is the first time that I feel like we can note a bit of a design change, a bit of a philosophy
That's
change.
true. Yeah.
There was a apparent power boost to the monk with these two subclasses, and one that I welcome. I don't feel like it was so much that it makes the previous ones obsolete, but it does show a change in understanding of the monk subclasses and what they can do. So one very small thing is just the fact that you get some proficiencies out the gate. That's a big overall change, I think, in Tasha's, is understanding that it's okay to give in and out of combat stuff at the same level, and that it generally doesn't upset the power balance too much. Love that, which is why we see 3 different abilities given at 3rd level. Compare that with the Way of the Long Death that has its, at 3rd level, you kill a creature, you get temp HP. That's not really too interesting. But the Hand of Healing and the Hand of Harm are both just really strong. And they still go into this idea of when you use your flurry of blows, so when you spend a key point anyways, you can replace one of your unarmed strikes with the Hand of Healing for free, and that kind of increases as you go on. I think at 11th level you can either do the Hand of Harm or the Hand of Healing without spending a key point. So they find more and more ways to eliminate the need to just burn key points.
Right, for sure. Yeah, and add some utility and healing to the monk, which is nice to see.
Yeah, overall,
And that,
love this subclass.
yeah, and Way of Astral Self is interesting as well. It's another one where it in some ways it kind of feels like the monkiest monk, but it just with a little bit of a mystic bent to it, where they like become in tune with their astral bodies and like can bring them in. But it's all just to help them fight better. They get mystical arms that launch off of them and get hit further and hit harder because of it, and get some defense and things like that.
Yeah, and this one, I think it doesn't generally fit the monk progression. It actually makes a mistake that I feel like a lot of homebrewers make. It's when they look at a subclass, they want to make a subclass, and you need to kind of look at the existing ones in terms of matching power and say, okay, at this level they get this strength of ability, so at 3rd level of the monk they usually get some playstyle defining thing. Great, 3rd level, that's nailed with Arms of the Astral Self. But then at 6th level you have this almost ribbon ability. It's like, well, that's not really what the 6th level monk is supposed to be. I mean, comparing it to Way of Mercies, where you can end blinded, deafened, paralyzed, poisoned, or stunned. And then when you use Hand of Harm on a creature, you can subject that creature to the poisoned condition until the end of your next turn. That's a very big power increase at 6th level. Whereas 6th level of 6th level of the Astral Self, with Visage of the Astral Self, you don't get anything that's really changing anything. Your 3rd level ability is just as strong as it was, and now your 6th level ability is you can see in magical darkness. Okay, you have advantage on some out of combat ability checks. Fine, that's good. I mean, I like that. And then Word of Spirit is entirely a ribbon ability. People can hear you far away.
Right.
Cool. So a little disappointed with that. I really don't like the 6th level ability. And I'm sure we go into that in tons of detail on our episode covering it. But
So yeah, I agree. These two definitely introduced a big power jump to the monk that was needed. No big major changes to the monk though at its core. The closest though hand or Way of Mercy, I guess, is a little different flavor wise.
I felt like it kind of stepped
It does,
away just a
yeah,
bit.
that does start to step away. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, Astral Self doesn't. It's just another way for them to increase their martial prowess. Where Way of Mercy, yeah,
And I don't
that
know, like,
is
I'm trying to
pretty
put my
different.
finger on
Yeah,
it
it's
though, where it's like,
yeah,
because we had Way of the Long Death, and that didn't feel like a total change to the monk's style. But something about this, is it because of the healing? Is it
I
because
think it's
of,
because of the healing.
okay.
yeah, and the
That's an
Plague Doctor
odd
vibes
thing
to
for
it.
a martial class to get.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the
Yeah.
Plague Doctor vibes, like any sort of rendition of like a Plague Doctor in different media that you see, there always seems to be like very erudite, slow moving individuals, not this like fast moving, hard hitting monk. That seems
Yeah.
like a really kind of a unique, kind of cool combination, but it's definitely a departure from the base monk.
Yeah. And a welcomed one at that. Say flavor wise, I think it's fantastic. And I
Yeah.
love kind of the wanderer vibes of it.
Well,
So
that is very monkey.
yeah,
Monk
I
like.
guess I
Yeah.
guess you're right.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so there's still definitely aspects of that. Okay. And then anything else, Natasha's?
No, nope.
Okay. All right. Then finally, there's Fizzbon's Treasury of Dragons with Way of the Ascendant Dragon. We again have an entire episode on this where we just rip it to shreds. It's not great. It also brings nothing new to the monk. It's the dragon monk. They get their monk prowess through dragon energy, but in a really poor way, and it doesn't come through well. Overall, I'm really disappointed in this one. It adds no power to the monk. It brings nothing unique to the monk, and it's just a shitty class.
Seems like every lesson that was learned since 5th edition came out around the monk was just crumpled up and tossed out.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. Tasha's a little bit of optimism of where it's going, and then this came out.
And even worse,
And
there
like,
was
nope.
a unearthed arcana that people were pretty excited about, and they nerfed it. They
Yep.
nerfed it to the ground because I don't know, monks aren't allowed to be good.
The only thing I keep going back to is they did used to have in previous editions have the reputation of being like stupid strong. And so maybe they're really afraid of that, and it keeps being overcorrected. That's the only thing I keep coming back to, of how they keep screwing them up this bad.
If so, then paladins better watch out next edition. And warlocks and not sorcerers,
Not
wizards.
sorcerers. Yeah.
Wizards only. Oh my gosh, they changed the wizard spell casting to match the multiverse aspect, or like where it's like, you get a
no.
couple of once per day abilities. and
You
just
heard it
can't
here
for two.
first, folks. D&D 5.5 is getting rid of spell casting. I'm not going to stake my internet cloud on that one.
No, I don't think that's happening.
People said that before 4th edition, and then it came out. 4th edition, it kind of got rid of spell casting in terms of it gave everybody just like abilities and powers. So
Right.
you didn't have spell slots and all this stuff like we do. It really was a lot of once per day abilities or once
Right.
per encounter abilities, things like that.
Yeah.
So, Monk, what do we want to see from it in the future? I think that is the question we're at now, because I don't want to spend another second on the Fizzbands Monk.
Yeah. Like I said, watch the other video.
We said
It really adds nothing to this discussion other than just like the disappointments. Like, all right, they're not learning their lessons.
yeah. And now we need to teach it to them. You hear that,
Yeah.
Wizards of the Coast?
I definitely, the big one, and this is not like a unique take, is a change up to how key works. I don't have a good solution myself. I don't know if just simply more key would be it.
I feel like more key it's been tossed around a lot. Like, oh, add it based on proficiency or add additional key based on your wisdom. It would probably help. It's one way to go about it. I think tiers as well would probably be a good method of, at first level you have 5 key points, and then at 6th level you get 11 key points, and then at 11 you get more. So like it's more the slow drip of it that I feel like feels wrong, and that specific amounts that I just listed, again, don't take those as gospel,
Right.
but that concept of making it tiered might make it feel a bit better and allow them to give a bit more key as well.
How about the capstone? That's an interesting one to me because it seemed
Yeah.
this is like a solution to the problem in a lot of ways, but nobody's ever going to see it.
Yeah.
That's perfect self. At 20th level, when you roll for initiative and have no key points remaining, you regain 4. That is
It's
pretty
not very
cool.
good, but the biggest problem is it's a 20th level ability.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think 4 key points is really all that much.
Not a 20.
Like, it's so easy to burn through that in literally one turn that I would almost want that per turn. If you start a turn and you do not have any key points, you gain 2.
For a capstone, sure.
Yes.
So
yes.
maybe if we introduced earlier at 5th level, and it's like 5th is a big power jump in 5th edition. So stick with that. If you roll initiative and have no key points, you regain your proficiency bonus in key points.
So what we're basically doing there is we're changing key from a per short rest to a per encounter ability. Like, almost expecting you to have a good, healthy amount of key points every single encounter you go into.
Right. Yeah, and I don't hate that. Like, I think per account encounter abilities work really well in a lot of other systems and game styles and stuff like that.
Yeah, 5th
Fifth
edition
edition
definitely did not.
Yeah, I'm pretty
touch
sure
on them.
4th edition did that too.
A
Yeah,
lot.
5th edition.
That's the
just
weird
ripped it
thing.
out.
5th edition put them in capstones. It's bizarre.
Yeah, it is a little weird. So I don't know if like proficiency bonus key points back, it seems like a lot, but I guess it's really not. And it'd be at 5th level, you'd get 3 if you were
Right.
at 0.
Right.
I guess does it need
3
to be
per
if you're at
encounter.
0? When you roll initiative, you gain your proficiency bonus in key points. Why does it have to be when you're at 0? If I've got 2, should I really be punished because I conserved some?
If you have less than 3, you go up to 3. If you have less than your proficiency. Maybe I'm thinking from a 2 video gaming perspective, but if it's like when you roll initiative, you get a plus. That seems like really easily exploitable. Like you're
If
then
somebody's
trying
doing
to
that at
pick
the table.
stupid little fights to roll initiative to get more key.
You'd still be maxed at your level. Like, it's not like you
Okay.
could go over 5 key points. Yeah, so that would be the cap in my eyes, is like up to your level.
That's also, you should shut that shit down.
Yeah,
You, like,
that is the
carry
other
a
thing.
rat
Like,
in
Yeah.
your pocket and pick a fight with it and like revive it.
like, no, you did not roll initiative to beat the crap out of a rat.
Right.
You just did it. The
Right.
rat can't roll initiative. It just died. So that's I think something that could help a lot. And I do wonder if it would solve it, because I do think that at later levels, at 20th level or so, having 20 key points to mess around with is a lot. You aren't going to be running out after one encounter unless you're trying. If you're really trying to, flurry of blows every single attack, stunning strike off of every single attack. But the same
Yeah.
could be said about a spellcaster. It's like, well, yeah, I could
Less
burn
so.
all of my spell slots.
Right.
I think that's why it comes so much to the forefront of the discussion, is because the monk really, it's a strength and a weakness, but they can use all of their resources in a remarkably short amount of time.
Sure.
We're talking 5 per turn, easy. That's at max, that's 4 turns. You're done. You're out of resources.
That's about the average length of a combat, though.
Yes, but what I'm saying is no other class can quite match that, except maybe like
Right.
Warlock, for instance.
True. So I still think that's I like that direction. I like the idea of just roll initiative, get your proficiency bonus back in key points, and up to your current level, not obviously letting it go over. I do also think that the martial arts die should progress a little bit faster.
Yeah, I was gonna say maybe even just start it up a level. It doesn't
Yep.
start at D4; it starts at a D6.
And then have it cap at a D12.
Yeah.
And I think that
Well,
would
yeah.
change a lot in terms of keeping it in line power wise. I get the idea of keeping them at a D4 at first level or something, but you can just use any weapon and get a D6. So, or a D8 even.
Right.
It's pretty easy to get. I
It
mean,
is.
a
Yeah.
rapier is a D8 and is a one-handed weapon. So why do we need to wait until 11th level to match that? So, and that's one that I've almost been considering just doing at our table. Like not the key point stuff. That's a little bit more drastic, but just like the martial arts die starts at a D6. Because I feel like it's just an active effort to avoid having to use your unarmed strike as much as possible. And I don't
Right, and
like that
they
feeling.
even adapted to this failure of the class by making weapons more viable.
Right.
And that's not the direction I wanted to see. I wanted to see your fists be more viable.
Yeah.
Exactly. I don't feel like you should be totally punished if you're like, I want to play a purely no weapon monk, just going to use my fists. That should be encouraged. Yes, great. This class facilitates that instead of saying, well, you should probably use a weapon until about 11th level. Then it evens out.
And then this is another just kind of like specific kind of thing instead of like a broad strokes change, but they need better AC. I think that's a big weakness amongst their. They have no other option. They have to take on armor defense, even if they multiclass or take a feat to get armor proficiency. Their martial arts and their unarmored movements, and I even think like their flurry of blows and everything. Maybe flurry of blows, but regardless, like half of their abilities just stop working the moment they have armor on, even if they get proficiency in it. And so 10 plus your dex plus your wisdom, a lot of times it's going to be like 15 or 16 for quite a while. And you are 100% a melee character. You are up in the fray. Things are trying to hit you.
Yeah, the
And like they
only
don't have the hit dice to back that up either. They have D8s instead of D10s. And
yeah,
they probably can't have a really high constitution, so their health's not too crazy either. And since it takes key to be able to disengage as a bonus action, and a lot of times them doing that just opens up the squishy spellcasters in the back.
I see a
I
lot of
think they need a
times
higher AC.
people say that the mobile feat gets rid of a couple of the issues with the monk. That specifically being when you make a melee attack against a creature, you don't provoke opportunity attacks from that creature for the rest of the turn, whether you hit or not. And the reason I bring that up while you talk about the AC is that I think the issue is unless you're spending your bonus action to disengage and to get to a place of relative safety, then there's really no way to do anything but tank those hits. You are opening yourself
Right.
up to tank them. So,
and I don't know if I like that direction of going, all right, let's make them easier to get away. Because we already have a class like that, the rogue. That's the
Sure.
rogue's thing. You get in, do their heavy hits, and get out because they can't really tank the hits. I don't think we want to also then make the monk that.
Isn't it already, though, just by having the option to bonus action
But
disengage?
it's a key point. I think that's why it costs them a key point where the rogue isn't always on.
I also don't like it
Option.
thematically. You're the martial artist. You should be not
Dodging.
running away, but blocking. You should have a
Sure.
shield martial ability that costs key.
So that almost makes... Oh, wait, what did you say?
A shield
martial ability?
Yeah.
That
Like the
costs
shield
key.
spell.
You
Yeah.
do. It's the dodge action as a bonus action.
That's true.
It adds...
Yeah, they can do that. You're right. That's not a bad. I feel like whenever we have monks at our tables, they forget about that. I never see it.
And I also don't like, because I really don't like that bonus action getting lost. The reaction thing, I think, is a better idea.
Dodging
Yeah.
as a reaction.
Yeah, basically.
I could see that. Forego your reaction and spend a key point to dodge. I was going to say making it free as a bonus action.
Yeah, but then you do start getting to that issue of like you're going to want to feel like you do that most turns, and then you lose your flurry of blows or your martial arts unarmed strike, which is so critical to the monk.
Yeah, I guess that comes back to the whole issue, kind of in D&D, it's better to do damage because the best way to not take damage is to have the thing in front of you dead.
Right.
So if you
So
try to encourage the dodge action too much, it just slows down play more than anything.
right. So I think a really incredibly simple change is make the base of unarmored defense of 12. So your AC equals 12 plus your dex plus your wisdom.
Yeah, so you'd probably start at around
It's
17, which is equivalent with somebody who has medium armor.
yep.
Seems pretty fair to me.
Yeah. Maybe their hit dice should be bumped up to D10s instead of D8s. I don't know if that's starting to get too much, but
Oh, do they only have D8s?
they only
Oh,
have D8s.
oh man. Guys, this is a bad class.
It's garbage.
Uh, that seems a little low. That's,
Yeah.
I mean, don't clerics have a D8 as well? So it's just fighters have a D10 and then barbarians have the D12. I guess
Paladins have a D10, don't they?
they do. And I guess I am noticing a lot. Our monk currently seems to be taking a lot of damage, but his
Yeah.
stats suck. And
Well, that's his
he's,
fault. We didn't point by. That's his fault.
yes, it's totally his fault. I told him at the start, I was like, you don't need strength. And he's like, I'm going to make it 15. All right. Enjoy your dead character.
But it is definitely. I played monks and always felt like they felt a little squishy.
Yeah.
Like you don't want to be spending that bonus action, the key to always run away, and you don't have the AC or the hit points to be tanking all these hits. But you also have no ranged options, unless you're like one of the two subclasses that could do it, or you multi-class out of monk.
Yeah, I think it's really what makes the drunken master feel so good. Like the fact that you flurry of blows, you get that, and now you get to disengage for free. I
Right.
could almost see more things like that. I don't know. This sounds definitely too strong, but it's like if you do your flurry of blows, then you get your dodge action or your AC increases by 2, similar to like the
Okay.
Kensai.
I like that. Yeah. Oh, if you do flurry of blows, you could dodge. You get the benefits of dodge.
Right.
I think that's cool.
And again, it feels fitting. It's like,
Yeah.
that's what a monk should be. Yep, you're right.
Yep.
Advantage on dex saves, and I get to have disadvantage on all attacks against me. Perfect. So that's one thing. One aspect I think we need to bring up is Stunning Strike. I don't really love Stunning Strike because it does feel like an all or nothing type thing. When we talked about it earlier, just when a creature is stunned, there's a lot that changes. They lose their entire turn for one, incapacitated, automatically fail strength and dex saves, and then attack rolls against the creature have advantage. It's just kind of weirdly balanced, in my opinion. I know that it doesn't come up very often, but it's a very big save or suck ability at a relatively low level. And I never love it. It just feels like it can shut down an encounter too well if something doesn't have an extremely high con bonus, and it just creates this race to the top of having a high con to avoid Stunning Strike, but then they never get to use their Stunning Strike, and so it's less fun. Go ahead.
So are you saying you think it's too strong?
I think it's a bit too strong and also too weak.
Right?
What I mean is
that's what I'm thinking too.
It's not consistent. And I think it needs to be consistent. And I think making a less strong ability that didn't focus on a very high ability for most monsters, Constitution, would probably feel better. Spend a key point to basically put them under the slow effects I could see, where they only get an attack or a bonus action, and then they lose the reactions. I think that's it. Something like that where it stinks and they're like, oh, okay, now I guess I can only do one attack or something like that. But it doesn't feel like you're completely shutting down the character. I think this is something we're seeing as a design philosophy, not just in Dungeons and Dragons, but in video games as well, in multiplayer games, is that any type of thing that takes away your ability to play the game for an extended period stinks. And it's not just I'm a player too, damn it, as a DM.
Okay.
It stinks. When I'm trying to run an interesting encounter, and it's like, oh, and now either I have the monster have a high con and save on this stunning strike so the monk doesn't get to do their thing, or I fail and then I don't get to even make this a difficult combat at all.
Okay. I see that. Yeah. So if you are kind of changing things, like that definitely needs to happen with the other changes we've been talking about, making the monks a little beefier and tankier, more key points, increasing their damage die. Because right now it's kind of the only one of the really strong things they have going for them.
Right.
So okay.
And that's it. And I'm not even saying it needs to be like, drive it into the ground. I just think it needs to feel a little more consistent. And that means taking a bit of the power back to make it come up more often.
That's kind of it's. So we talked about the Way of Mercy and their ability to poison somebody with their key points is a little bit in line with that kind of idea. It's not save or suck. It's just not very good, and it happens. Ripping that out
that's
of
a good point.
That class, I don't know. You're right. I think you're right on the money with the issue, though. Slow.
Yeah, because
I like the idea for slow. I just think that might be a little bit much.
Much in terms of too far back, like not enough power. Interesting.
I don't know.
Because it's a key point, and looking at what a key point gives you otherwise, that everyone kind of agrees is worth a key point, is one additional unarmed attack. I mean, unless people think Flurry of Blows isn't strong enough, just like out the gate, because it gets enough use that I feel like it's pretty darn regarded. It's well regarded as strong enough.
My bias towards taking the Drunken Master feat out of the capstone of that subclass and making a default kind of, it's not me saying it's too weak. I just have too much fun with that idea.
Sure. Yeah, and I guess when thinking about pulling Stunning Strike back and being less powerful, again, maybe making it that slow ability, I do think that would come with other power increases, because there's a lot more power increases. I mean, even just, one that we mentioned of upping the martial arts die to be a D6 at first level, like that's a direct power increase across the board.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of what we've discussed is direct power increase. And here's one that's like, let's just make that one feel a little bit better. And I think it's if nobody ever gave you Stunning Strike, you wouldn't be like, oh, they're taking away my favorite thing about the monk. It would be like, oh, okay, this is a good ability. I slow the enemy because I'm, distracting them or doing whatever, hitting them in a way that they're unable to. Well, I guess it's the exact same thing.
So it could have the exact same flavor.
Yeah, exact same flavor.
It's just,
you're interfering with the flow of ki in an opponent's body. I mean, it just, I don't think people would look at it and go, oh, that's where the monk's too weak. That's the thing. Be like, no, that's probably fair. And there's other aspects that need tweaked here.
You could even kind of restore it at the capstone. Like, now you can stun again now.
Oh, sure.
It just
That's a good point.
Yeah.
That's a really good point. There's tons of spots where they could throw it in. Timeless Body at 15th level. That's the one where it's a ribbon ability entirely. Just also make it so Stunning Strike now stuns. Or even if you want to make it more powerful at that point, make it paralyzed. I mean, whatever. Well, actually, now that we say that, we could do 5th level slows. When's the next one? I guess 13th level, where Tongue of Sun and Moon is also just a ribbon ability. 13th level, it stuns, and then 15th level paralyzes. Maybe that's too soon. I don't know. I'm not writing anything down anyways. Anything else, though? I mean, I don't want to stick on Stunning Strike forever.
No, I have nothing else. I think we kind of covered.
I guess we didn't talk about a new good capstone. Because if we did theoretically put everything we talked about into design, then we're talking about giving key points regardless of whether or not you're 20th level.
Right.
I wouldn't mind just Quivering Palm being the capstone for everyone.
Okay, that could be cool.
Yeah, I'm actually down to just completely dismember Way of the Open Hand and put it in the class. So nothing's lost.
Bake it in, and then the 20th becomes okay. Quivering Palm maybe needs to be bumped up and damaged a little bit because it's a 20th level capstone.
Sure. That seems fair.
Yeah.
And do one of those like, and you get it once per day for free. And then it costs key points. Great. I don't care. I'm
Right.
20th level.
Right.
Let me do the cool monk thing.
Yeah.
So that's a lot, though. I mean, I feel like in terms of changes we've wanted to make to a class, this was not a small tweak here or there.
No.
So I'm excited to see what does come of it in 2024. It's only a year and a half away ish.
Depends
Maybe
when in
nothing.
2024.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not like they really gave a hard time.
No. Yeah, I believe that's a wrap on our Monk retrospective.
You didn't let me do my segue. I was gonna say something. It's gonna be a great segue.
All right, we'll reset you up. What sentence do you need said?
I need to say hard time again, but I don't even remember the context.
Yeah, they never really gave us a hard time on when the 2024 changes are coming.
And you know what never gives me a hard time? Metallic Dice Games when I try to use the code MM10. Yeah, you can actually do it when they have sales as well. So they had a Mother's Day sale recently, 20% off all dice. Use that code MM10. That's an additional 10% off, which does not add. It wasn't 30% off. It was like the 20% came off first and then it was 10% off. So it really came out to like 28% off, but still fantastic deal. And you too can get that deal at any time that they're having a sale using the code MM10 to get dice and dice accessories.
And I hope you know I'm not going to cut our discussion about resetting you up.
That's okay. No one listens to the end of the episodes anyways. Thank you as usual to our patrons who probably are the few people who do listen to the end. Ed G, Moto8, Brian H, Craig A, Isaac M, Jeth W, Luca L, Star Shinobi, Vincent M, Bob F, Joe P, Rick D, Sentinel D20, Tyler S, Adam A, and Rob K. You all are amazing. And to anybody else who is listening and wants to join the Patreon, you can go to monstersmulticlass.com/support, where you can join the Patreon, see our other affiliates, and in general get the episodes a day early. And if you liked the episode, comment, like, subscribe, ring the bell, all of those things. We really should put that earlier in these super long episodes, but we never do and never will because we're awful. Yep. It's just hard to remember when you're in a flow. You know, we got things to talk about. But yeah, let us know what you like about the Monk, what you want to change. I mean, there's tons of stuff to comment on about this. So please, want to hear what you think of what we would want to change. Maybe you think it sounds really silly. That's fine. You can be honest. We can handle it. I cannot handle it.
All right, and as always, thank you for watching.